Social Security at the same time dealing with the national debt. We'll also and the deficit. We'll also be getting into some other current affair issues. So, with no further ado, I welcome our host of our chief guest of the show, our host of the show. It is his show, David M. Walker. David, welcome.
Good to be back with you, Steve.
Thank you. I had to get it in quick. I know we only got 45 minutes today, so sorry I was talking a little fast.
No problem at all. No problem.
Had a double shot of espresso in my coffee. I've been up since 4:30 in the morning. It's been one of those Mondays. But thank you so much, David, for being with us today. And today we're talking Social Security. Kind of we've done it before, but I think for the listeners, could the viewers as well, could you just kind of talk a little bit about where we've been, how we've gotten to where we are today, and then what do we got to do to fix this thing?
Well, first, I think you have to go back to the founding of the Republic. At the founding of the Republic, when you look at the preamble of the Constitution, there are certain things that the federal government has an affirmative responsibility to take care of, provide for the common defense, being the primary issue that they were responsible for, which couldn't be done by the individual states. It also talks about in the preamble to promote the general welfare. Well, promote is very different than provide. But if you look at what's happened over the years, the federal government has grown dramatically in many ways, including with regard to social insurance programs. The one that we're going to talk about today is Social Security, but there are others: Medicare, Medicaid, housing for the poor, food for the poor, et cetera. And so let's talk for a second about Social Security. The first Social Security program by government was in Germany, and it was in the 1870s by Otto von Bismarck. Bismarck was facing a rise of socialism in Germany, and the socialists wanted to provide a broad range of public-provided social programs, including social insurance programs. And so Bismarck decided he better get ahead of it, and he proposed that anyone who lived to be 70 would receive a modest pension from the government. Well, he was a brilliant politician. And why do I say that? Because the average life expectancy at birth in the 1870s in Germany was in the 40s. And he offered a pension to somebody who made it to 70. And needless to say, a vast majority of people didn't make it to 70. He later reduced it down to 65. But still at that time, average life expectancy was not at 65. Fast forward to 1935, as part of the New Deal, that was advocated by Frances Perkins. And who was Frances Perkins? She was the first female cabinet secretary in the United States, and she was Secretary of Labor. And it was Frances Perkins' idea for the Social Security system. And originally a broader system, but ultimately pulled back to just seniors and did not include health care. And so in 1935, the Social Security program was enacted into law. At that point in time, the normal retirement age was picked to be 65. Average life expectancy was a little bit less than 65. Fast forward to 1983, the Social Security Trust Fund was declining in value and was expected to be exhausted. Actually, in 81, expected to be exhausted in 83. And so President Reagan worked with Tip O'Neill, then Speaker of the House, to form a commission to propose reforms to Social Security to keep from having to have automatic across-the-board cuts in benefits, because that's what you get. If the trust fund goes to zero, by law, you can only pay benefits out of assets in the trust fund. And if there's not enough money in the trust fund, you have to cut back benefits to match the revenues. Back then, it was about a 25% gap, and they were within weeks of hitting that cliff when the legislation was finally enacted into law and signed by the president. It was intended to stabilize the Social Security system for many decades to come. And, it did stabilize it for about 50 years or so, but it didn't adequately consider demographics. When I was born in 1951, there were 16 people working for every person retired. Today, it's about 2.7 to 1, and it's going to go down to about 2.2 to 1 within the next 10 years. Well, demographics are destiny, and we're now in a situation where, as you said, the combined Social Security trust funds are supposed to go to zero in 2034. But there are separate trust funds, and the trust fund that deals with retirement income and survivors benefits and disability, well, not disability benefits, so survivors benefits is scheduled to go to zero in 2032, which would cause, without reform, a 22 to 28% a cut in benefits if you don't reform it. Now, that's obviously unacceptable. And so the real question is, what are we going to do, and when are we going to do it? And hopefully we won't do the same thing we did last time, which is wait to the very last minute, because the sooner you make the changes, the less they have to be, the more transition time you have, and the more confidence that people have in the system. So that's kind of the background. There's a lot more, but I don't want to dominate the conversation.
Yeah, we want to talk really big picture on these shows. It's so easy to get the detail, but let's put this in perspective. So, for my children, you've got grandchildren, let's say they start working, at 24 or 25, they get out of college, assuming they don't go to med school or graduate school. How does this affect them? I mean, we hear these numbers at 2034 or 2026. Let's say they go to 70, they work 50, 60 years. Are we saying that 80% of those people may not get their payout, that they're working, they're paying in the system, but if we don't fix the system, then they will not be getting Social Security?
Well, see, we have an opportunity to exceed the expectation of every generation of Americans for the following reasons. Number one, young people don't think they're going to get the benefit. They think they're paying in and they're not going to get it, and they're wrong.
Okay.
They're going to get it at a different age.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get it potentially in a different amount, but they're going to get it. Seniors at the same point in time think that their benefits are going to get cut substantially. They're wrong too. That wouldn't be equitable. It wouldn't make economic sense, and it clearly is not politically feasible. So therefore, we have an opportunity to reform the Social Security system, phase in the changes over time, and everybody can get more than they think they're going to get. So it's expectation management. I call that a win. The problem is that we don't have leadership on the issue in our elected officials. Now they're talking about creating commissions. We are going to need a commission. We can talk about that. But, you also have to keep in mind that Social Security, quite frankly, is probably the easiest thing that we have to reform. It is a driver to the long-range fiscal imbalance, but it's nothing like healthcare. And as I just said, we can exceed the expectations of every generation of Americans if we go about it the right way. We just need to get started soon so that we can frankly get on to the much tougher issues, which are what are we going to do about healthcare? What are we going to do about tax policy and other areas that are frankly much bigger challenges than Social Security reform?
Before we bring in the panel, so what are some of what are some of the things that we need to start thinking about? Big picture. You already mentioned a few things, but
yeah, and the book that I'll have coming out in January of this coming year, along with Joe Penland Sr., who's my co-author, who's got a very compelling personal story with regard to Social Security. It will cover Social Security and a range of other issues, but with regard to Social Security, the issues that we have in there are illustrative solutions that have been supported by almost 80% of representative groups of voters. So another example of Washington being a lag indicator, the people are ahead of the politicians. They're willing to accept tough choices. if they're part of a comprehensive goal-based plan consistent with principles and values that bring people together rather than divide them apart. And some of the ideas are as follows. One, you don't cut anybody's current benefit. So whatever your current benefit is, if you're a senior, that doesn't get cut. Secondly, you maintain a base defined benefit system where the investment risk is borne by the government and where you can count on it for the rest of your life and where it's indexed for inflation. Thirdly, we're going to need more revenues. And one way to get more revenues is to significantly increase the taxable wage-based cap. Right now, it's about 184,000 or so. To significantly increase that, but not eliminate it. We did that in 1983. We significantly increased the payroll tax cap in 1983. I think it's going to be deja vu all over again. To avoid or minimize a payroll tax increase on the rate, because that is a very regressive tax. Most individuals pay more payroll taxes than income taxes. And while we've eliminated the cap on Medicare, Medicare is 1.45% for the individual and for the employer. Social Security is 6.2% for the individual and the employer. And if you're self-employed, you pay 12.4%. Now, there's a possibility you could end up raising it some for the employer, but not the individual. That's something that will probably be on the table. Gradually increase the normal retirement age, not the early retirement age, which is 62 and would stay at 62, but the normal retirement age, which now is 67, 2 years over 24 years, 1 month a year. Make the benefit formula more progressive. In other words, keep more people out of poverty. Believe it or not, the lowest poverty rate in the United States today is seniors, less than 10%. The highest poverty rate in the United States today is children. And who represent our future? Children. So change the benefit formula where we're keeping more people out of poverty, although it's very low right now, and that we don't turn it into a welfare program by saying that if you were successful in life, you don't get the benefits, but we change it so the higher replacement rate at the lower level, a lower replacement rate than what we have right now for upper middle and upper income. But again, don't turn it into a welfare program. Adjust the COLA to make it more reflective of cost of living for seniors. There's some inequities in the system you need to deal with. We need to have greater investment flexibility. Right now, by law, the trustees can only invest in U.S. government securities. It used to be that they were thought to be the safest investment there is. Well, we can debate that now. In fact, Jamie Dimon, who's chairman and CEO of JP Morgan, was asked within the last month whether or not he would invest personally in long-term U.S. Treasury security, and his answer was no. In addition, we need to recognize that Social Security was never intended to be the sole form of retirement income. It was intended to be the foundation that was going to be supplemented with employer-sponsored retirement programs and individual savings. Unfortunately, over half of people that are retired rely on Social Security as the primary or sole source of their retirement income. Our savings rate is too low, so we need to change that. So for people who don't have an employer-sponsored retirement plan, have an automatic supplemental savings that goes into an individual account in their name that they control, that they will be able to have or their heirs, when they pass. So it helps get our savings rate up. It helps people have supplemental retirement income, probably based in large part of the design of the Federal Thrift Savings Plan, which is the largest 401k plan in the world. So that's a framework, and that got the support of almost 80% of representative groups of voters, and I call that pretty good.
How do we get? We're going to open up to the panel, but I guess the main thing is getting Congress to act, getting the Senate to act. We keep kicking the can down the road. Maybe it's just the political environment we're in. Just yesterday on Face the Nation, him, Joe Manchin, former U.S. Senator, talked about he's making the move now to independence running for Congress and the Senate, talking about how these independents can bring these issues and make the sausage by getting people to agree that we've got to get out of the comfort zone and do these things. But I think Manchin was good on the news yesterday with his daughter. I know you've worked with them on No Labels.
I have. I know both of them, and I've done events with them, and probably will do events with them in the future.
Yeah, pretty interesting.
I've been an independent for a number of years, and I'm glad that he's joining the ranks. Almost 50% of registered voters in the United States are now independent, and I think it's going to continue to go up.
Well, David, thank you for the overview. We got Rick Rosner and Sasha Starr with us. Rick has a question for you, David.
Yeah, so you said Jamie Dimon said T-bills aren't a great investment right now. So what are the risks? That interest keeps going up and then the value drops, or?
Yeah, T-bills are short term. He said long term.
Okay.
Yeah, long term bonds. Yeah, the risk is that we're going to have to start paying a lot higher interest rates because our need to finance more. To finance our deficits is increasing while demand for U.S. debt is decreasing. So it's the old basic supply and demand, right? And what do you have to do in that circumstance? You have to pay higher interest rates in order to be able to sell it. And as you know, Rick, the second largest expense in the federal budget is interest. The fastest growing expense in the federal budget is interest. And within 10 years or so, it's going to be the largest expense in the budget, higher than Social Security, if we don't change course.
So I got another question. The U.S. just bought billions of dollars worth of Japanese yen. Do you want to explain that? And I'm sure that costs us money too.
I have no idea why we did that, and I would question well, I know the yen is low right now, okay, but I don't see why we should be trying to speculate on foreign currencies when we have our own problem that we need to take care of.
So we didn't buy all that yen so that Japan will keep buying our bonds?
Well, Japan is the largest holder of our bonds, okay? But the Chinese appetite has declined dramatically. Their holdings of our bonds are about half what they were several years ago. The second largest holder of our bonds, and this is talking about foreign nations, is the UK. But the largest holder of our bonds is the Federal Reserve.
Go. Sasha, David, thank you so much. Sasha, any words for David?
Well, it's not so much economic question, but this is maybe more historical category. But anyway, I was thinking about it for the last 2 days, almost nonstop. And I remember that in first when he became president in his second cadence. So Trump was saying that he will end up war between Ukraine and Russia in 3 days or in 10 days or whatever it might be. Well, it's now almost 2 years soon, and there is no end to it. And I started to think about something. I also looked at some literature about Henry Kissinger and what he thought about Russia and possible war with Ukraine, because he was still alive when there was already a conflict. And I started to think about something. If Henry Kissinger was very, very careful about the balance of power and have to be careful and about expansion of NATO, it's not a very good move. Perhaps he is right. But what's interesting is that his goal was through very, very sort of disguised strategic means to make Russia weaker. That was his goal, not to defeat Russia, but to make it weaker, okay? So if that's the case, and the present administration should think about the same way, because nobody proved Henry Kissinger to be wrong. So if he's right, and the present administration should at least somehow follow in the steps, why the hell there is a goal to stop the war between Russia and Ukraine? Because the war makes both countries, specifically Russia, much weaker. Russia is bleeding today. So why just say, well, we'll see. Not just stay away from it, especially now when you're busy with Iran. You don't even have to justify yourself why you're sort of taking a step back from the war and just make both countries weaker. Isn't it should be a goal of present administration?
Well, first, Russia is weaker. There's no doubt about it. And the Ukrainians have been very heroic. They've also been very innovative with regard to their weapons and tactics, if you will. As I've said many times before, I think the Ukraine-Russia war is going to end in a stalemate, very similar to how North Korea and South Korea ultimately came to an agreement to just stop fighting. But, by the way, there's no peace treaty there. It's just an armistice, if you will. I think that's likely to happen. I'm not super worried about Russia. Obviously, none of us like to see the kind of casualties that are happening in Ukraine right now. The Russians are suffering a lot higher casualties than the Ukrainians, but both of them are suffering casualties. I think we both could probably say that if we had our way, we'd rather not have war, period. Okay. I think where we are right now is to try to end that conflict as quickly as we can. We're not going to intervene militarily in that conflict. I think, Ukraine ends up joining the EU. They get some security guarantees from the United States and others that are actually in writing with a treaty that's ratified by the Senate rather than the Bucharest Agreement, which wasn't worth the paper that it was written on. Okay. I don't think that Ukraine ends up joining NATO anytime soon. We need to wrap up this thing in Iran. It's going on too long. As I've said before, I think, if they don't get serious pretty quick, we need to take out Karg Island. That will have a devastating impact on them and maybe cause them to actually come to their senses. I think our biggest strategic issue that we've got to deal with, meaning the United States and the West, is China. And I think on that, we both have our spheres of influence. I think China has a sphere of influence, in Asia, in particular with regard to Southeast Asia. I think that we need to try to work together in ways that can avoid conflict. I think that can be done. And what I'm concerned about is that, if we have a debt crisis, then that's going to embolden our adversaries. That's going to embolden Russia. That's going to embolden Japan. Forget that. Russia. That's going to embolden China. That's going to embolden North Korea. And whatever's left of Iran, it's going to embolden Iran. Those four countries have had an economic, military, diplomatic, and cultural alliance against the U.S. and the West for several years now. That was in my book, America in 2040. And as you know, Sasha, I predicted that the Russians were going to invade Ukraine right after the China Olympics. And they did, okay? And I also predict that China is going to end up, employing a blockade on Taiwan if we don't come to some reasonable accommodation to do that rather than physically invade them. I think that's the last resort.
David, if you want to turn a little bit farther to year 2008, there was Olympics in China. And right after that Olympics, Russia invaded Georgia, and there was a huge calamity, and eventually West had to kind of let it go.
Before we go to Dr. Sharif, David, my question is, you did a good job. You always do a great job, but in many of your podcasts, you talked about the four areas of a global superpower:
right,
economic power, military power, diplomatic power, and then of course cultural influence. So, this social security argument we're having today, does this fall into the economic power of our country, the ability to take care of ourselves? Are we perhaps overextending ourselves with too many military conflicts, which then take away from what we're doing at home in the United States?
Well, we're not learning from our founding father, our primary founding father, George Washington, who warned us to avoid excessive debt, to avoid foreign wars, to avoid regionalism, and to avoid factionalism. And by that, he meant political parties. We're doing a lousy job of listening to his advice. Social Security is the most popular, and some can argue the most important social insurance program in the United States. As I said, we can reform that and exceed the expectation of every generation of Americans. We just need to get on with it. The much bigger challenges are going to be in the other areas that I mentioned. The truth is, the federal government today, U.S. government, is roughly 10 times bigger than it was in 1913 when the income tax was adopted, when the Federal Reserve was established, and when U.S. senators became directly elected by the people rather than appointed by state legislatures. Spending has grown dramatically, revenues have not kept pace, and the gap is growing. And so we're going to have to engage in a fundamental reassessment of what the federal government should do, what the state government should do, what the local government should do, what government versus the private sector versus the not-for-profit sector. I'm working on something right now with the National Academy of Public Administration, of which I'm a fellow, to see if we can end up bringing about a major government transformation task force that will look at all these different things. Because if we don't, what's going to end up happening is the federal government, it's not a matter if, it's a matter of when, it'll have a debt crisis. Then it'll have to act suddenly, dramatically. Bad news flows downhill. And so the states need to be preparing for this. And by the way, next week I go to Utah, which is generally ranked as the best managed state in the United States, and either 1 or 2 in financial condition. And they are planning for what are they going to do when the federal government restructures. Which programs are going to remain priorities? Which ones are they going to cut? And to the extent that they don't want to cut more than a certain amount, what revenue sources are they going to look to try to be able to meet their obligations? I hate to say it, but to my knowledge, that's the only state that's doing it. And the good news is there's supposed to be about 20 states there next week. So hopefully more will start next week.
On a different topic, what does it do, if anything, to us economically when the president acts unpresidential? Over the weekend, Trump did a lot of crazy crap. He put up pictures of himself as Elvis, kissing Jesus, claimed that he shot a 70 and won a golf tournament. When the president is clowny, does that have any effect internationally?
Was that 9 holes or 18 holes, Rick?
It was his 43rd victory at a club that he owns.
Yeah. Okay. Well, those are unaudited numbers. Look, I have a major problem with regard to how Trump behaves. One of the biggest differences between the current president and the last president, you hardly ever saw him.
Right.
The current president, you see him way the hell too much. He's on TV every day.
But here's my political theory on that. I mean, I got a theory on this. I think it's intentional, David. We're getting off track here for a second, but I think the reason that he does it, his advisors, he says crazy things because he's on TV every day. What do we do in the major news networks in America? We only talk about Donald Trump, for example. It's like the Donald Trump channel. So the Democrats get away from talking about these issues you're talking about because everything becomes about some crazy thing Trump has done. So I really think there's something there. He's made it kind of a reality show, which has kind of worked in his favor to get back in the White House because he's enabled Trumpism to grow even after he got defeated the first term. This is my political theory. I think he's doing a lot of this intentionally. I don't think he's crazy. I think he's actually very smart, and he knows exactly what he is doing.
Well, my personal view is, obviously he has media experience. He had The Apprentice. All right. Yeah. He obviously likes attention. He's got a huge ego. All right. I think the Democrats, have become the anti-Trump party, and they're not focusing on, They're not focusing on issues enough, and some of the issues they're focusing on, quite frankly, are outside the mainstream, especially with regard to Democrat Socialists of America, which I think are really out there.
Before we get to Sharif, what do the Democratic Socialists say about Social Security? I haven't heard much about.
I have not heard them say anything, but I've heard them say a lot of things like get rid of the Senate, get rid of the president, get rid of the borders.
Police, get rid of police.
Get rid of the police, get rid of prisons, get rid of ICE, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But
all eyes on Michigan.
But those guys aren't representative of even. There are plenty of like Mamdani. I don't think would say any of that stuff, and he's a Democratic Socialist. The people you see on Fox representing the DSA are the more extreme loony, Democratic Socialists.
And probably a person for him to be on Fox. That's who they want on there. Yeah,
right. So I was thinking the last normal president we had, president who wasn't sullied by all sorts of personality issues, was the first George Bush. Just quietly, bureaucratically did his job, and he stopped being president in 1993. Everybody else is.
Before we get back to it was also a very different time in politics.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Steve.
It was also a different time in politics. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have social media. We weren't as divided. Republicans and Democrats were able to work together to talk to each other. It was the end of the Cold War, but it was a different time, I think.
Yeah, it's a different era, right?
Yeah. So he was able to, and you very rarely saw him. You only saw him during a press conference during the first Gulf War, and then every few years at the Republican convention, and that was it. Now David Walker has a good point. You see this president every single day, Monday through Sunday, every news conference, every show. I can't get away from him. I can't turn the TV on without seeing Donald J. Trump on the television.
But I think he's gone too far to the point where I don't even want to see it.
Yeah.
Okay? He is overexposed, and I don't even want to see it.
David, Dr. Sharif, you've been quiet, and then Mark Lee, can you both interact with the guest?
Dr. Sharif or Mark, anything?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. This is a very challenging economic situation right now. We are observing from South Asia because energy is a major challenge right now. Secondly, climate change is another challenging situation right now. Third, I want to say the political unrest because of the youth revolutions and other things. India, Bangladesh, and all of the country has political unrest. In that situation, Honorable David Walker, what you want to say about normalizing the whole situation? Look like we have challenge. It's unstable conditions. So before we go for any economic improvement, we need stable politics. So what's your thoughts about this challenging situation?
Well, I'll talk about it from the U.S. perspective, but a lot of this ends up applying elsewhere as well. I think we need reforms to our education system. I don't think we're teaching some of the things that we need to teach. For example, we're not teaching financial literacy. We're not teaching civic responsibility. We're not teaching our kids the difference between capitalism, socialism, and communism. We're not learning from history. We're not learning from others. And because what's happening is, remember, if you look at the theories of socialism and communism, one of the first things they want to do is to take control of education. And they want to try to affect the minds of young people. And to the extent that they're not being provided a full and fair view with regard to the information, then they may end up, backing ideas or movements that if they were properly educated, they wouldn't be backing. The second thing in our country is we need political reforms. We now have a republic, which is a representative democracy that is not representative of nor responsive to the general public. We need redistricting reform to maximize rather than minimize competition. We need integrated and open primaries. The parties can endorse candidates, but everybody runs in one primary. The top two run off in the general. We need campaign finance reform. We need term limits. I can go on. Some of those things can be done without constitutional amendments. Term limits and campaign finance reform will require constitutional amendments, and I'm all for it. But I think the first thing we have to do is put our finances in order, because if we don't put our finances in order, we're going to have economic, national security, foreign policy, and domestic tranquility problems. And I don't want any of those.
Yeah. And if you look at Great Britain, for example, I mean, I've read in the past, Fareed Zakaria has brought up the point that they overextended themselves around the world and then got to a point where they just never really the same empire they were. And that could be said for the United States, that we don't get our economy, it does bleed into other areas, our power in the world, our economic, our political security, our ability to negotiate deals, coalition building, foreign policies. But the foundation is a strong economy. And I think if that falls, then everything else starts to crumble. So hopefully this is something that we can address, not as Republicans and Democrats, but as Americans.
Well, as America in 2040, my last book makes it very, very clear. The leading indicator on the way up as a superpower is economic power. The leading indicator on the way down is loss of economic power. The United States is not exempt from the laws of prudent finance. If you can't put your finances in order, you will lose economic power. It's not that complicated. It's time to recognize reality and start taking steps if you start taking time on. And what the book's really going to be about is how do we save Social Security and how do we provide a better future in America, which includes fiscal reforms, political reforms, education reforms, immigration reforms, a variety of things that are important that our political system has been unable to deal with. Oh, and by the way, I didn't say it, political reforms too.
Jacoby McDuffie, we got the fiery Jacoby on the card. Jacoby, any input on Social Security or these issues we've been talking about today?
Well, I'm coming in late, and I think Dave and I, we always agree on, raising the cap on Social Security and stuff like that to help make it solvent. But yeah, there's a lot of issues and a lot of reforms that we must take place with, but I don't want to jump into the conversation and add something that's already been redundantly said or that. So yeah, I'm right now just sitting back and listening.
Hey, David, just really quickly and everything along those lines. I know you've only got a few more minutes to go and everything like that. One thing is I know that you and Nick are big on education and the need for education reform. I'm going to actually make a plug for another show on the network that we just launched. So Jay Graham has started this show here called, and you'll love the title, David, is called Financial CPRR. So she is a bookkeeper and a financial person, but it's basically the notion that we need our own finances kind of recitated. That's the way you would if you were in a heart situation and all along those lines. So it's every Wednesday at 7:00, and it'll be Erin Reglan. She's got like a 52-week plan. She's a single mother here in Durham, but she started this plan that is actually getting folks to do things on a regular basis. She has like this notion that if we save $27 a day, you can save a whole lot of money in a year and throughout the process and everything like that. So she's got this program. The launch was last Wednesday, so it'll be every Wednesday at the time that I just mentioned and everything like that. But coming back to politics, I was just wondering, one of the things that I mentioned earlier on the World Edition is that I am hearing that even though Trump is very much out there and about and all along those lines, that it is hurting the Republican Party, because I'm hearing that a lot of folks in the swing states are actually saying that he is not he, but the Republican Party is way underwater because they're not paying attention to the fiscal issues. But I just wondered, is that something you're hearing as well? Because apparently in a lot of the swing states, they are polling significantly lower than their Democratic rivals.
Well, several things. One, there has been a general decline in public trust and confidence in institutions, and especially at the federal level. If you look at public opinion polls with regard to the president, the last one I saw, he's in the upper 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Congress is at 15.
Well,
15, okay? And by the way, it's a bipartisan problem. The Democrats were in charge. Congress had very low ratings too, all right? And so we have a crisis of confidence with regard to our governmental institution. I don't think either party is taking the fiscal issue seriously enough. The last president who did was nobody since him has taken it seriously. But at least there are efforts that are underway now in Congress to potentially create mechanisms to deal with it. The most significant one is a bipartisan fiscal commission that, in my opinion, would have two sets of recommendations, one on Social Security standing alone, the other on everything else to get debt to GDP down to a reasonable, sustainable level by 2040. Both those bills are in both the House and the Senate. There's a chance that they could end up moving in the lame duck session. Neither party is talking about the fiscal issues in the 2026 elections. Neither party is talking about it. So it's not going to be a big issue in the 2026 elections, but it is going to be a major issue in 2028 for lots of reasons. And that's why I'm hitting back the trail again to be able to help make sure that it is.
Well, thank you. Well, David's time is almost up. We might stop a little early today, Mark, but
he said we could continue going the hour and everything like that. He just really he won't be around and everything like that. And everything like that.
We're gonna continue to do this until Nick gets back. I'm really enjoying moderating the show, so maybe I can do it. I'm getting the cobwebs off of my retirement now that I'm back in the style of working and doing media. But I think this was great, and we want to continue our conversation of the political environment in America when we bring David back about any of these issues, whether it's healthcare, Social Security. How are we going to address the problems that we have as a country and do it in a way that's respectful, civil, and bringing us together? But as Bill Manchin said yesterday, we're reaching a point, an all-time low in American politics. People are really skeptical of institutions, of politicians, of leaders on both parties, and hopefully the independents can play more of a role.
We'll see how the independents play and everything like that. Hey, just really quickly, and I know you're leaving, David, and everything like that, but I just did one of those Rick Rosner things, and I looked up stuff and saw the Democratic Socialism policy on Social Security. It was it's a site called I Side With and everything like that, and they said after using ChatGPT that apparently the Democratic Socialists would strongly agree with the statement of eliminating the income tax on taxable earnings and stop spending current funds on other programs instead, as they support the progressive taxation and ensuring the wealthy pay their fair share. Eliminating the income tax on taxable earnings would help fund Social Security without raising the retirement age.
The math doesn't work. You can't build an economy off of soaking the rich. Yeah, go ahead and soak the rich, but you also have to do others. Go ahead.
And that's what the other thing they say. They said Democratic Socialists would likely agree with this statement in terms of the disadvantage that low-income seniors have whose life expectancy is lower than wealthier seniors, as apparently Democratic Socialists prioritize social safety nets and protecting vulnerable populations. Raising the retirement age could disproportionately harm low-income seniors who may have lower life expectancy and rely more heavily on Social Security. So you can actually go with I Side With and type in the answers because they give a couple of views, because apparently the Democratic Socialists prioritize social safety nets and protecting vulnerable populations, and they're raising the retirement age could harm seniors who rely on Social Security. It's one of the things that apparently they argue and everything along those lines.
You have to keep in mind that our economy has changed dramatically. That there are certain occupations that require stress and manual labor. For example, my grandparents were steel workers and mine workers, all right? And therefore, there are certain occupations where you need to potentially make an adjustment. Just based on age is not the right criteria. And in addition to that, if they're saying they want to eliminate taxation of Social Security benefits, that harms the Social Security Trust Fund. It doesn't help it. And in my personal view, is you should never tax Social Security benefits more than 50% of the benefits, because you got to keep in mind, so half the benefits were paid for by the individual, and the individual didn't get a tax deduction for that 6.2%. And so I don't believe you should tax more at 50% level. And by the way, not everybody pays taxes. Depends on your income. It's just capped at, right now it's capped at, I think, 70%. Shouldn't be higher than 50.
We haven't talked about corporate taxes.
Yeah.
One thing that helped this stuff function 50 years ago was that corporations paid a higher percentage. But now with international business, I don't think you can charge a higher percentage because they'll just go overseas. So is there any way to get more money out of corporations?
Yeah, we'll have to do that on a separate session. But I think we took the corporate tax rate too low. Right now it's 21%. I think we'll still be competitive for 25. And I think the biggest changes that need to be made with regard to tax policy is to eliminate and reduce a lot of deductions, exemptions, credits, and exclusions to make the code a lot simpler, fair, administratable, and so we can keep tax rates as low as possible. But that's a whole different subject. You guys,
you go ahead, David. I know you got about that.
He's running late. Thank you, David.
Yeah, he's got to run late. I was going to say just really quickly, Steve, apparently a month and a half ago, Joe Baer, who's on The View, was defending democratic socialism, arguing that programs, including Social Security and public services such as the fire departments, ambulance services, and garbage collections are examples of the political ideology at work when the panel was discussing the growing influence of New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani and his allies. He said, "I'm not scared of the term, and Social Security is a democratic socialism." She said, partly unemployment insurance is the people who pick up your garbage, the people who take the fire out of your house. All of these are democratic socialism is what she was arguing. So there seems like be some discussion as to what the term means, and sometimes it might be getting demonized the way that Jacoby talks about things and all along those lines.
You know, I know we got to close out here. I want to leave maybe stop about 5 minutes early. I got to run to work, but I think, Mark, what's driving today we had a wonderful conversation about Social Security. We're going to be having conversations about healthcare, about AI, technology, the digital divide, foreign policy in America. But the reality is that I think what's driving the democratic socialists is the gap. Go ahead, Dr. Sri, but the gap between the wealthy and the poor in America and the working class is at an all-time high, the gap.
Yeah.
And so with AI displacing jobs and people out of work with higher costs, the democratic socialists are like, what about us? Kind of the Michael Jackson song, they don't really care about us. We're the working people of this country. What about us? And I think that's the reality, is that it's driving those extremists from the left to dictate who wins these primaries, which could have actually hurt them in the long range plans when they try to win the presidency. They may lose. If we're going to watch Michigan, if they lose Michigan, they could lose that Senate seat. If because this guy isn't going to be as formidable a candidate, I think, as I can't remember the lady running. She's a more moderate candidate.
Haley Stevens. Haley Stevens is the lady running.
So
by the way, we do have a listener that's been commenting on stuff that we've been saying, so I do like to give them the floor when we get them. But Michael Erdman is saying Darwinian social truths, corporately mediated social truths, and Trump's wise truth social media corporations. What is true, truth, and more truthful with respect to sense, science, and salience, unfolding, surviving, and advancing. And I believe that that's, if I remember correctly, one of Sharif's people and all along those lines. So that was the comments that he was making and everything like that. And there were some other comments I'm trying to get to as well. It looks like he had a few comments that he was making, but that was one of them that he made in that sense.
So social Darwinism Darwin did not believe in social Darwinism. That's social Darwinism is an excuse for vicious economic practices. nature red in tooth and claw. No regulation, just let everybody fight it out, and some people survive and some people don't. And that's a very rough way to run a country.
Right, exactly. And I think typically that's a great point, Rick. I mean, socialism as a way of government has very rarely or seldom ever worked in a country succeeding and thriving. Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's a balance of enough regulation, but at the same time, not too much. What makes America great is we can have different viewpoints and still have had a democracy where the institutions have been strong. A strong government, a strong military, a sense of order, but enough freedom of expression and thought. So you can burn a flag in front of a man or woman who spent their career defending that flag and the freedom of the United States. But that's my God-given right as an American to burn that flag. So protest, those kinds of things existing at the same time. But I think it's socialism without capitalism, without that think of, I'm going to come to America and start something big. That's I think that's.
I think there are sweet spots economically. Like communism, there's no sweet spot for communism. Nobody's run a communist society that frickin' works. But there are, and what works for the U.S., which is pretty capitalistic. What works for Finland, which is a country of 2 million people, where it's dark half the year, you might be able to be more socialist in a very uniform, teeny-ass country, compared to the U.S., where you need bigger systems, more capitalistic systems. But like most reasonable people don't consider public libraries socialism, or roads socialism, or fire departments socialism. And so there's a sweet spot where the U.S. is mostly capitalistic, but we do pay taxes to pay for some reasonable that almost everybody agrees we should pay for.
I agree.
Yep, and we did have Michael bring up some other comments. I did put them up there, like what is noteworthy, trustworthy, and praiseworthy coming forth and going forward, and a number of other things that he was bringing up as well. So I'm glad that he would join us. I'm pretty sure that I remember seeing him in the rooms with Sharif, so I think that he comes out of Sharif's World Talent Economic Forum crowd and everything along those lines. So hopefully he'll be joining us on other conversations as well, because he was even saying what AGI, human systems of ecology, economics, and engineering, embraces and engages greater family, freedom, and functionality coming forth and going forward. So definitely he's bringing up some interesting points, and folks can go back and read his points.
I want to talk about one Mamdani policy that he wants to do, and which is make buses and subways free. You just go through the turnstile, you get on, and there you go. And probably right now in New York City, I'm guessing of a subway token, or they don't use tokens, they use cards. But it probably costs close to $4 to get on the subway. But so if he makes it free, the money has to come from someplace. So it probably comes from taxes or selling bonds or something. Does it transform society? Does it? I don't think so. It's a minor thing where you're spending you're paying for it somehow, or somebody is. But it doesn't mean that New York City transforms.
No, it's a minor thing, but it has even been impactful here. And I know Steve's going to wrap up and we'll get rid of everything, because I know ever since the pandemic, we have had free buses. They just voted back in July that it'll be free again until July of 2027, which means that it was June of 2027, and then they'll vote again, which means we've had free buses here in this particular municipality now for going on 6 years and everything like that. So, and get ready to head toward 7 years, because it definitely came out during the beginning of the pandemic and was under the past mayor. And then the Mayor Leo has kept it going, bring it up to the city council, and they just voted to continue it. So yeah, and that's a number of places that have got free buses because of the pandemic. Some have gone back by Raleigh.
It's cheaper than I thought. New York City, you can get a 7-day unlimited pass for $5 a day for 35 bucks a week, which it's not nothing, but to be able to go any place as much as you want for $5 a day is a pretty sweet deal.
That's a very sweet deal and everything like that.
It's been a good show. I want to thank you all for being on Economics Monday. And if you have ideas, please email Mark Lee or me, or just send us a note. We want to have a positive, productive conversation on the issues of our country and the world, but do it in a respectful way. And this is a really well-run show. I want to thank Mark Lee, the Roku and Pod TV teams. Glad I'm back. Hopefully I can continue to moderate this with Nick and Mark, and appreciate you all being with us. And we'll see you next week for another edition of Economics Monday. Thank you.
Yep. See you then.